The first step is blocking out the eyebrows. This takes a few different layers of glue, and you want to make sure the glue dries in between each layer. So as I first set my eyebrows with this first layer, then I will go into starting the rest of my makeup while they'll dry, and then just continue to add the layers as I go. So next is contour. I've chosen a darker color than I would normally use for my everyday wear because, you know, Halloween gets a little spooky. So you want those spooky dimensions. But the tricky thing about this is, since I am closer to people while playing Winifred on a train, you don't want to be too ghouly or too over the top like you would if you were on stage. So trying to find that right balance is a little bit tricky. So I'm adding contour also in my lines here in the creases of my chin, down the sides of my nose, just to give some dimension. And then Winifred has a little wider nose than I do, so I'm going to give it some width and kind of just close it off at the bottom in hopes to keep it kind of that wide look. Then I'm just adding a little bit of shadow to my Cupid's bow and adding some shadows along the chin. Okay, so now I'm going in with my main highlight color or foundation color, and I'm just placing that where my contour is not, and avoiding my eyebrows still because I still have glue drying. And I'm going back in with my contour because, oh, I realized I did not get my jawline. I love to get my jawline for, you know, some dimension, but also that's going to give you that dark kind of spooky look as well if you're leaving it a little unblended. And adding a little more shading around my nose, just with the side of my brush. Gotta check to see if those eyebrows are dry, and they were, so I'm just adding yet another layer of glue and just kind of brushing it through my eyebrows. So now I'm taking a lighter highlight and I'm just putting it in the places I want to highlight a little bit, mainly around those creases around my mouth, on my chin, just spots where I want the light to pick up and to help kind of bring in some of that contrast with those finer lines. Okay, eyeshadow. So there's a lot of different ways you can make Winifred's eyes just dark and round, right? So I'm just using eyeshadow right here. And then because I want it a little darker, I just go in with a few different layers and just not go too high up by my brow bone, and then keep my eyeshadow pretty closed off underneath for the eyeliner. And of course, you gotta do the other eye, so here you go. And I'm just patting it in and blending as I go. The tricky part with any eyeshadow look is basically keeping them pretty symmetrical. So blending and adding the right shape is always going to take just a little bit more time, especially when you're doing harsh lines like I am here. Now I'm going to go in with an alcohol wipe and remove some of the residue of the glue just underneath my eyebrows, and then I will do the same on the top for kind of a little smoother finish. So here's a little bit of outline, just outlining where I'm going to be putting my gorgeous lips. As you know, Winifred has this crazy blush that she really hasn't blended, but is kind of symmetrical on her face. So trying to make it look as if I didn't try and just plopped it on there is kind of hard. This is where I'm going to go in and add a little color dimension to my eyebrows. Mine are a bit tricky because I do have them microbladed. So it's one thing to try to cover the hair color. It's another thing trying to cover the microblading. Because I wanted to stay within the same cream products, this color may not be quite as opaque as I would like it to be. It could make it a little bit easier in covering my brows, but I wanted to keep kind of the same texture going. So it just did require a little bit more layering, but it still worked. So I'm just adding some translucent powder. You could also do a colored powder, but I just kind of want to set that color correction in there a little bit before I start adding on my next layer. Okay, here's the next layer. I'm going in with a darker color than my normal foundation, and I'm just putting it on there. Blocking out eyebrows is not as easy as it may seem. I know this firsthand now. But by using this darker foundation, it's going to give me a little more coverage power. And I'll also be using that between my eyebrows and up around my forehead just to help blend that darker color in, and then applying a little lighter shades around it as well. And it just helps camouflage what will still be really showing. So I'm just taking a Q-tip and wiping off some of those edges of the glue that I didn't quite get, just to get rid of some extra texture. Blending, 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 and pressing, pressing, pressing. So I found if you kind of go back and forth different directions on your eyebrow, you're going to be able to get kind of those angles and bumps where your hair is still laying. And then you just get a little better coverage that way. So I did have to get this fun set from ColourPop. It's actually Winifred's lip liner and lipstick. And I did not sharpen this sharp enough, so I fixed it. little straighter lines there. I do tend to draw out of the lines a little, so luckily Q-tips and more makeup can help when I get things out of the lines. But it's kind of a detailed lip, and you want it symmetrical. You want it to look like Winifred's lip, so it is going to take a little bit of trial and error, and you're just going to expect to do, a little bit of wiping and cleanup. But really, it's all worth it in the end, because, how can you not give Winifred that pucker? And now I'm just adding my foundation on the sides of my lips where the lipstick is not, just to blend that in. And this is the matching ColourPop lipstick that, of course, I gotta use. And then I'm just adding a little bit of contour for some dimension around the lips, just so they pop a little bit more. I'm just adding one last layer of powder to my brows and just really pressing it in. Last but not least, the teeth. And there's my final look.